Reviewing the situation. Hmm. What else? Well, for which his labor is. What did I mistype? I don't know. Okay. Today will be episode 21. Very good. I don't know if I like this shirt. Oh well. Stop recording. No, wait, we want to avoid starting with the whatever that's even called. Here we go. Welcome, Henry George Daily Devotional, episode 21. Can you believe it? We continue with chapter 4, the maintenance of laborers not drawn from capital. My summary of the last episode was George keeps talking about how via exchange, whatever the desires of a laborer are, determine what kind of wealth others produce. As well as supposing you don't have sustenance when you want to start a new job and that job is going to take a long time before it produces wealth, as long as you're able to sort of sub or partially devote some time to gaining sustenance, you'll be fine. This reminds me of how a lot of game developers will do contract work as they need to provide for their current costs whilst they pursue their dream project on their own. Something I've considered doing, but I am a sort of partial faux sub landlord, so I'm coasting by for now. You gotta start texting me more. Here we continue. As a matter of fact, where there is labor looking for employment, the want of capital does not prevent the owner of land which promises a crop for which there is a demand from hiring it. Either he makes an agreement to cultivate on shares, a common method in some parts of the United States, in which case the laborers, if they are without means of subsistence, will, on the strength of the work they are doing, obtain credit at the nearest store. Or, if he prefers to pay wages, the farmer will himself obtain credit, and thus the work done in cultivation is immediately utilized or exchanged as it is done. If anything more will be used up than would be used up if the laborers were forced to beg instead of to work, for in any civilized country during a normal condition of things the laborer must be supported anyhow, it will be the reserve capital drawn out by the prospect of replacement, and which is in fact replaced by the work as it is done. For instance, in the purely agricultural districts of Southern California, I think there's a typo there. In the agricultural districts of Southern California, there was in 1877 a total failure of the crop, and of millions of sheep nothing remained but their bones. Also, I'm sure I mentioned this in earlier episodes, but these typos must just be some artifact of the like scanning method they used to get this book, because when I read Progress and Poverty in physical paperback form, I do not recall typos at all. Alright, we continue. In the great San Joaquin Valley, where many farmers without food enough to support their families until the next harvest time, let alone to support any laborers. Okay, that was the finishing of that sentence in a sense. There was a total crop failure in 1877. Okay. But the rains came again in proper season, and these very farmers proceeded to hire hands to plow and to sow. And for every here and there was a farmer who had been holding back part of his crop. As soon as the rains came, he was anxious to sell before the next harvest brought lower prices, and the grain thus held in reserve, through the machinery of exchanges and advances, passed to the use of the cultivators, set free, in effect produced, by the work done for the next crop. The series of exchanges which unite production and consumption may be likened to a curved pipe filled with water. If a quantity of water is poured in at one end, a like quantity is released at the other. It is not identically the same water, but is its equivalent. And so they who do the work of production put in as they take out. They receive in subsistence and wages but the produce of their labor. And that's a really nice little analogy of filling the pipe. And note that for most, for wealth creation, not services, filling that pipe requires use of land, unmade materials, minerals, soil, space, air, sunlight, water. And thus we finish chapter 4, the means of labor is not drawn from capital, and we reach chapter 5, the real functions of capital. Let's jump right in. It may now be asked, if capital is not required for the payment of wages or the support of labor during production, what then are its functions? The previous examination has made the answer clear. Capital, as we have seen, consists of wealth used for the procurement of more wealth, as distinguished from wealth used for the direct satisfaction of desire, or, as I think it may be defined, of wealth in the course of exchange. I mean, I suppose it could be annoying, be like, oh, it's my desire to create more wealth, so I'm using capital to satisfy my immediate desire to create, which is just happens to be to create more wealth. I don't know. Some people are just annoying. They have funny voices. Capital, therefore, increases the power of labor to produce wealth, one, by enabling labor to apply itself in more effective ways, as by digging up clams with a spade instead of the hand, or moving a vessel by shoveling coal into a furnace instead of tugging at an oar. 2. By enabling labor to avail itself of the reproductive forces of nature, as to obtain corn by sowing it, or animals by breeding them. 3. By permitting the division of labor, and thus, on the one hand, increasing the efficiency of the human factor of wealth by the utilization of special capabilities, the acquisition of skill, and the reduction of waste, and on the other, calling in the powers of the natural factor at their highest, by taking advantage of the diversities of soil, climate, and situation, so as to obtain each particular species of wealth where nature is most favorable to its production. Incidentally, Henry Ford, who was born in 1863. So when this was published, he was like 16. He had not yet made the whatever it is, the assembly line. He where there he like was a Georgist. Henry Ford. Henry Ford. Yeah. Founder of the Ford Motor Company, father of modern assembly lines used in mass production. Quote, "We ought to tax all idle land the way Henry George said. Tax it heavily so that its owners would have to make it productive." Henry Mother effing Ford, Mr. Capitalism assembly line himself. So I don't know what to make about that. Make of that. 12 minutes in. Let's go a little longer. It was a long weekend. I need some more George. Capital does not supply the materials which labor works up into wealth, as is erroneously taught. The materials of wealth are supplied by nature, but such materials partially worked up and in the course of exchange are capital. Capital does not supply or advance wages, as is erroneously taught. Wages are that part of the produce of his labor by the laborer. Quick side note. We just spent a whole bunch of time with George talking about how the current definitions of capital are inconsistent with themselves. So they cannot be taught correctly at all once you have inconsistent definitions. So, anyway, they're not using his definition of capital, so that's why he says they're erroneously taught. Even though he says he doesn't care what definitions of capital you use so long as it's clear, but basically he says their definitions of capital are just bad because they're inconsistent. Capital does not maintain, did I read that one? Capital does not maintain laborers during the progress of their work as is erroneously taught. Laborers are maintained by their labor. The man who produces in whole or in part anything that will exchange for articles of maintenance, virtually producing that maintenance. See, that's where it says virtually. I wish he would say that more. Capital, therefore, does not limit industry, as is erroneously taught. The only limit to industry being the access to natural material. The only limit to industry being the access to natural material. But capital may limit the form of industry and the productiveness of industry by limiting the use of tools and the division of labor. Do we stop there? Oh, I looked at the wrong number. We're only 10:20 into this devotional. We'll do this nice chunky paragraph. That capital may limit the form of industry is clear. Without the factory, there could be no factory operatives. Without the sewing machine, no machine sewing. Without the plow, no plowman. And without a great capital engaged in exchange, industry could not take the many special forms which are concerned with exchanges. It is also as clear that the want of tools must greatly limit the productiveness of industry. If the farmer must use the spade because he has not capital enough for a plow, the sickle instead of the reaping machine, the flail instead of the thresher. If the machinist must rely upon the chisel for cutting iron, the weaver on the hand loom, and so on, the productiveness of industry cannot be a tithe of what it is when aided by capital in the shape of the best tools now in use. Nor could the division of labor go further than the very rudest and almost imperceptible beginnings, nor the exchanges which make it possible to extend beyond the nearest neighbors, unless a portion of the things produced were constantly kept in stock or in transit. Even the pursuits of hunting, fishing, gathering nuts, and making weapons could not be specialized so that an individual could devote himself to any one, unless some part of what was procured by each was reserved from immediate consumption, so that he who devoted himself to any one, sorry, so that an individual could devote himself to any one, unless some part of what was procured by each was reserved from immediate consumption, so that he who devoted himself to the procurement of things of one kind could obtain the others as he wanted them, and could make the good luck of one day supply the shortcomings of the next. While to permit the minute subdivision of labor that is characteristic of and necessary to high civilization, a great amount of wealth of all descriptions must be constantly kept in stock or in transit, to enable the resident of a civilized community to exchange his labor at option with the labor of those around him, and with the labor of men in the most remote parts of the globe. There must be stocks of goods in warehouses, in stores, in the holds of ships, and in railway cars, just as to enable the denizen of a great city to draw at will a cupful of water. There must be thousands of millions of gallons stored in reservoirs and moving through miles of pipe. Selah. You made it. You made it. To the, yep, you made it. Imperial units, they're okay. Is Celsius and Fahrenheit considered metric and imperial respectively, or is that just some other weird discrepancy? I don't know. Um, this is where we ended. Um, Fahrenheit is imperial, Celsius metric. But why? Why? Is this just a historical thing? Yeah, I'm aware of Kelvin. It's not like metric. I mean, I guess it starts at 0. Like, why? We don't we don't say like kilo degrees, decadegrees. I don't know. It's just that just happened to be, that was just tied into the whole unit system, I guess. I suppose. I don't know. That makes sense, I guess. I finish. Chapter 5, the real functions of capital. Zero Celsius is yes. Yes. So I guess by being all into 0 to 100, that makes it more metric-like. Yeah. I mean those prefixes are just helpful when you're dealing with very large quantities, which you just don't get to with degree changes, you know. You don't say increase it by, 10,000 degrees. But I mean, we do talk about like the temperature of the sun. I mean, they both just use the term degree, which is the weird, like, it should almost, you almost, like, we just call, like, oh, this is Celsius and this is Fahrenheit, but it almost should be like, there should be, like, degrees and then fugrees for Fahrenheit degrees, like, are Celgrees and Fairgrees, you know what yeah, I don't know, it's kind of silly. Whatever. Um, George describes labor as filling a pipe with water and other equivalent water squirts out. Then he starts preaching about how capital allows for three or so has how capital has like tools, um, tools, natural reproduction, and subdivision of labor. Good enough. Good enough for government work. We should have many degrees of degree. No, because you then need also distinguish education degrees and angular degrees. Yeah, I sort of thought, yeah. Upload video. OBS recording. HEDD 21, Book 1, Chapter 4, and 5. Yep. English. One of the homies who is in Central Atlanta works at Cerritos is basically an OC. I agree. It's like super suburban, very clean, not very Latino. We don't need this anymore. That would help. That would be a step in the right direction. I mean, it's funny. Your experience in the OC in Santa Ana and Anaheim feels more LA than Cerritos does. and then most of like what the OC actually feels like, or is most associated with, really. English, none. Today in Cerritos. There is, I'm gonna Google in a second. Close. There is something, Los Cerritos Center, which is, is this what they just call the Cerritos Mall? That's funny, that's just what we call the Cerritos Mall. Oh, my last, I never was able to even upload my last episode, because this is like broken. Spotify for podcasters is just broken. What do I have like another browser installed, right? Firefox. And I have to log in. Log in. Why is it not letting me log in? Well, this is great. Oh. Spotify for podcasters. Continue. Yes. I don't know. Not correct. I probably used a randomly generated secure password. Alright, we're gonna have to look at this. This might be what I use. Damn. Mm-hmm. Made the place dirty and moved some homeless people to the suburb. That would help. But there are like the rich gated communities of LA. So you could also just send us some celebrities. I've heard something about Stanton and Fullerton being not as good as I heard. Yeah, there's some sketchy parts of Stanton and Fullerton. My impression of Stanton is the place they with the wall kept range FT3 with the well kept range, and for Fullerton is ultimate nightlife where you get invited to enter nightclubs with no fee, and also a place where you can just find $2 on the street. Frida Cinema was in Santa Ana. Tustin and Irvine. Tustin's like sort of the cheap version of Irvine. Irvine is like the perfectly um, planned, model neighborhood. This is frustrating. Gmail.com. And they're saying that's invalid. God damn it. Wait, it finally popped up. What the heck? New episode. What a headache. So I don't think we ever did 20. Also means I need to view this. Okay. Now, no, no. 120. Next. Generating that preview. What do you mean the celebrity homes? While riding an LA bus to go back and forth from Cerritos, the bus passed by many of these military. Yeah, and hindsight maybe should release them. We are the Animaniacs. We're and Yakko Yaks. You could review that some recent over an hour long fight. Ooh. Oh, that hurts me though. What version were they like? How old of the version were they playing? They're playing like the main branch. I don't even know how much I'll get from that because I've changed it so much. Now, no, no. 120. Nope, this is 21. The stable version dot 155. But it's like the old trailer. Alright, posted. It's true. Alright, I'm going to stop streaming for a second and start streaming again after I disable the Henry George Devotional channel. Not that, is anyone, how do I see? Yeah, I don't know. Nobody even watches from, I'm not a very popular YouTuber. Oh well, I'll be right back.